Hello everyone, Andrew here for Mr. AC Pilot, and welcome to a little tutorial series where we're going to go about really bringing our Minecraft shots and animations to life. I find a lot of the time when you are kind of watching action that's going on screen, you're watching the character action, the surrounding environment can be almost eerily still. And so what we're going to do in just a few simple videos is really focus on how to bring our environment to life. With that being said, today we're going to be working on a blowing grass simulation, and we'll have custom controls for our simulation so we can affect large areas. But enough said, here's what we'll be creating. So as you can see, we have the controls to do even just a simple still wind, or something as big as a howling storm that's blowing in. Alright. Today, as always, I'm going to be using Autodesk Maya. That's literally the only program you will need. You can totally follow along in Blender, Cinema 4D, 3ds Max, your program of choice. What we're doing is fairly generic, so you shouldn't really have any trouble following along. For those of you that are wondering, I haven't uploaded recently. I'm actually working on an original student short film with an idea that I've been developing over the last 7 months now. So that should be coming in the next few months, and I'm super excited about that, so make sure you keep your eyes peeled. Alright, let's get into it. So now that you know what we're creating, what we're going to do is create one little unit of blowing grass, and then we can actually duplicate that to build up our global simulation. So the first thing I'm going to do, now being in Maya, is I'm going to go to the polygons visor, and I'm going to create a new polygon plane. Now that's going to come in really small. I'm going to jump over here into the channel box, and I'm going to change the scale to 100 in all channels. And what this means is we've now scaled up this plane to be 100 centimeters by 100 centimeters, which is a meter squared, or the equivalent to a real Minecraft block. If you're seeing a wireframe like me, simply hit the number 6 on the number pad, and that's going to change to shaded view. Select your polygon plane, and over here in the channel box under the inputs, I'm just going to change the subdivisions to 3 by 3. For a video like this, that's really all that's going to be necessary, and because we're duplicating this, we really want to minimize on geometry. Selecting my mesh, I'm going to rotate it up in the X. I'm just going to key in here a 90-degree rotation. And I'm going to just duplicate this, selecting the object, hitting Control D, and I'm going to rotate that in the Y, again 90 degrees. And now what we have is the basic grass unit, and that's just a static mesh, and we will shortly transform this into our simulated object. So I'm going to select both of these meshes, and under the polygons menu bar, I'm going to go to Mesh and combine these into the one mesh. So now we just have a single object here. It's probably a good idea to go along and delete the history, so I'm going to go to Edit, Delete by Type History, and that just basically tells the mesh to forget that it was originally two other pieces of mesh and just start afresh with this geometry, so we shouldn't have any problems. Alright, the next thing I'm going to do is change the polygons menu bar to the animation menu bar, and under the Create Deformers tab, we're going to create a lattice, and I'm going to go ahead and click on the option box here. The main thing I really want to pay attention to is resetting the settings, so you can just do Edit Reset if yours aren't already at the default. And the divisions, these three boxes correspond to the divisions in the X, the Y, and the Z. And 2 by 2 is okay for the Y, which is the height. I'm going to change this to 3. And in the local divisions, I'm also going to change this to 3 in the Y. And that pretty much is good for us. I'm going to go to Create, and what you see is our lattice box that's blue here. It actually comes in, and you'll see that it encompasses the object that we just created. And I'm going to select the lattice itself, and right-clicking, going to Lattice Point. And what this allows us to do, I'm just going to select the top 4 lattice points here. And if I hit W on the keyboard, I can go to my Move tool, and I can actually move these points, and you can see that as I move these points, it actually influences the mesh, and the mesh is kind of constrained to the lattice cage, so it deforms, and you can almost see the basics here of our blowing grass. So what I'm going to do to handle these lattice points more efficiently, with just the top 4 selected, is I'm going to still being under the animation menu bar, go to create deformers, and I'm just going to create a cluster, and that's just going to create a point in the center here that we can really use to influence these four corners at the top. Just a note, if you can't see this, so just make sure under the Show tab you have deformers enabled. Okay, so we've got a cluster now, and as we move this, it actually has the influence of those four vertices we selected before. So now we have our object where we can move this around arbitrarily, and we have control over our grass unit. And the way we're actually going to make this work in the simulation is we're going to write a very simple expression. Now, there's no need to be intimidated. It's going to be very simple, straightforward, and most importantly, very powerful for our needs. So I want to write I want to write an expression that controls movement in the Z and movement in the X. Okay. So the first thing I'm going to do to go about this is I'm going to, while the cluster handle itself is still selected, I'm going to select the Translate X channel, hold down Control, right click, and select Expressions. That should pop open the expression editor for you. And you can see, because we open the expression editor from the Translate X channel, that's already the selected object and attribute. So I'm going to go ahead and copy this into the expression dialog box. And I'm going to start off by writing a really simple expression. So the translation in the X is going to be equal to noise, and I'm going to have an open and a close bracket here. And inside of those brackets, I'm going to write time. So it's going to be noisy, or what is a random value that is a function or takes time as the parameter. So I can go ahead and click create. I can minimize this, and if you look and I start playing through this animation, you can actually see there's a subtle movement back and forth, but that's really not going to be enough for us. So I'll just pause this and I'll open up the expression editor once again. And I want to exaggerate this a little bit, so I'm going to, at the end here, I'm going to do an asterisk, which is the multiplication symbol in coding and scripting. I'm going to multiply that just by 10. So I go ahead and I can click Edit, and we can have a look at the results now, and you can see that the cluster is actually drifting a lot more. Alright, but it's still not quite fast enough, and we don't have the control over the speed. So once again, going back into my expression editor, I'm going to multiply the time by a number, and I'm going to use 3 because I already know this works out kind of well. So the time is being multiplied by 3, so it's kind of fast, and the actual noise itself is being multiplied by 10, which means that these two numbers, 3 controls the speed and 10 controls how much it's being affected. So once again, I can go ahead and click Edit, and let's have a look at our results. And look at that, we already have something that resembles our Minecraft grass block blowing in the wind. And that's pretty much the scary part of it done. So, you know, a script or an expression is something really simple that we can use to add great functionality to our object. But I'm going to take it one step further. I'm going to add some custom controls to this. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to select everything in the scene, just draw a marquee around this. And I'm going to go to Edit, Group. And this is going to create a new group that contains the lattice, the control cluster, and the actual mesh. Over here, I'm going to rename the group to something meaningful. I'm going to call this Grass Simulation Group. And this name's important because, well, I've actually missed the L there. This name's important because we're going to use this later on. So make sure you name it something meaningful that makes sense to you. So I'm going to go ahead and hit enter, and I'm going to actually lock and hide the channels because I don't really want to move the group. I just want it to have the controls we can use to influence our mesh. So I'm going to go ahead, selecting Translate X, and then shift selecting down to Scale Z, right click, and I'm going to go lock and hide selected. And that just gets rid of them so we don't accidentally move the group. We only move our individual objects. Okay, and now what I'm going to do is, for our expression, instead of having, let me just quickly bring up this cluster point. Instead of having a number that is a hard-coded number like 3 or 10, we're going to write an attribute, one that is frequency for the 3 and strength for the 10. And I'll show you how we're going to do this. It's very simple. So I'm just going to select, with the cluster selected, just hit the up key, and that's going to select the group, and you can see it is indeed the group. It doesn't have any of the channels. I'm going to go to modify, add attribute, and here we can actually add in our own channel. I'm going to name this frequency, and this is going to control basically the speed at which the wind is moving through. You don't have to worry about these settings, the defaults work well. A float is like a decimal, so we just have a number, a point, and then a series of numbers after it, just like the translate, rotate, or scale. And for the default, I'm going to put in that number we had before originally, and that was the number 3, because as I said, I know this just kind of works well to start off with. So I'm going to add that, and I'm also going to add in another attribute called strength, and this is going to control the amount of displacement that the grass has at the tip. Again, I'm going to leave it as a float, and I'm going to set the default to 10 to match up to what we had before. I'm going to go ahead and click OK. And now that we've created those two attributes, you can see they've appeared over here in our channel box. Okay, so we have frequency, strength, and these aren't actually connected to anything at the moment. They're just attributes, they're arbitrarily on this group, and they don't do anything. We can still click play through our simulation and see the cluster point moving. So let's connect these bad boys up. I'm going to go ahead, select the actually going to go and select the cluster in here. Just got to be careful. There we go. So with the cluster selected, I'm going to go ahead and again select Translate X and Control, hold down Control, right click, go to Expressions. That will bring back my expression editor. And the first thing that I'm going to do is change the displacement. So instead of 10, I'm going to change this to the name that we called our group. So I'm going to call it Grass Simulation Group. And you know, the biggest problem here is going to be accidentally misspelling this. Just make sure this is exactly the same as the group name, Grass Simulation Group, and we're going to write dot frequency. So the dot is like it means that we're accessing a specific attribute, and the attribute is frequency, and we just created that attribute. So now instead of multiplying by 10, it's multiplying by this custom attribute that we've made, which we know is defaulting to 10, but we can change to handle it how we would like it to be. Oop, I just realized I made a mistake here. This attribute at the end is strength, and the 3 is actually the frequency. So we'll go ahead and copy this little bit of code we've written here, and I'll copy that, get rid of the 3. So you can have a look here. I'll just try and zoom in my screen a little bit so it's very clear what's going on. So I have my time multiplied by the group's frequency attribute, frequency, and the whole thing is multiplied by the group's strength attribute. Okay, looks good to me. I'm going to go ahead and click edit. And now what we should see is as we play through this, it doesn't look like a whole lot's changed, but what's actually happened now, if I go ahead and select something here and press the up key, I can actually adjust these attributes to control my simulation. So I can change the strength to something like 50, and this is going to have, you know, quite a strong displacement from the resting point. Or I could change my frequency to something like 1, which is going to be kind of slow. And so this is really powerful because now we can dynamically control how our grass simulation is acting. And when we add more grass blocks, we can use this same group control to affect every grass object in the scene. So that's all the scary stuff out of the way. What I'm going to do ahead now is go ahead and just clean up the scene. We'll assign a tall grass shader to this, and I'm actually going to add one more custom attribute, and that's what I'm going to call bias. And bias is really how much I want the grass to be already pushing in a certain direction. So if you can remember how we did that, good on you. I'm going to go ahead, select the mesh, up to get to the group, and I'm going to go again to modify, add the attribute. I'm going to call this simply bias, and bias is really just a term that means almost offset, I guess, in this sense. I'm going to go ahead and use a float. I'm not going to worry about setting a default this time, and I'm just going to click OK. Simple as that. And I'm going to again select my cluster, and same as before, click on the translate X, and you can see it's got a purple background here, and that means that it's connected to something, and it's connected to the expression. I'm going to right click, control right click, go back to my expression editor, and at the very end here I'm going to add a plus symbol, and then I'm going to copy the grass simulation group name just so I don't misspell it now that I know it's working. Grass simulation group dot bias, which is simply going to add whatever number we specify in the bias control to further affect the grass. And if this doesn't make a whole lot of sense, bear with me and I'll show you in a sec. So we'll go ahead and click edit, and now what we can do is going back to the group, as I move the bias, you can see that the bias is actually different to the strength, because if I crank the bias right up, and I'll put the strength back to something a little more reasonable, you can see the strength is just controlling really the offset from the resting position, but it's almost as if we've used the bias control to really push the offset or the resting position way out in a certain axis. So you can see now we have these three basic controls which we can use to go pretty much from everything, including kind of a calm breeze right through to a howling storm, and a really powerful tool to have at your fingertips, especially to be able to create simple scripts like this. So I'm going to head and set these back to defaults: 3 for frequency, 10 for the strength, and 0 bias. Alright, it's looking good. Before I go ahead and assign this a shader, I'm going to just show you how to duplicate this. Of course, you're probably going to want to have multiple grass objects in your scene. So selecting the grass, actually it's important that we zero this out first. So I'm going to go ahead back to the group and set these custom attributes we made to 0. So now we just have a straight boring grass. And I'm going to just simply duplicate this. And just as before, I'm going to go to create deformers, just create our lattice, right click on the lattice itself and go to my control points. Selecting the top ones, I can go ahead and create the cluster. If you forgot how to do this, you can just reference the previous part of the video. And then all I have to do from here is I can literally just copy my expression from the expression editor over into this new piece of grass. So I can just do Control C and move over here and go ahead and basically just paste that expression in. It's just important that we change cluster 1 handle to cluster 2 handle, because this is the second grass object that we've made. Make sure you go ahead and click create, and that's going to put that in our scene. So now when I press up and I'm going to get back to my group here, I can change the frequency back to 3, strength to 10, and you can see now both of these objects are affected by the same lattice. And this is a really simple process. You can go ahead and repeat this, and you can have a nice I guess you can do this to crops, you can do this to grass, you can do this to anything that kind of sways. You could probably even get away with having a deformation on spiderweb, and you might want to get creative with the actual points you influence. Maybe it's not the top, maybe it's the middle. Just throwing ideas out there. So now that you know how to go ahead and really ramp this up to a bigger scale, we'll just do some final cleanup. We'll assign a shader to this, and that'll pretty much be a day for us. So to do a shader, I'm just going to simply select my mesh here, and I'm going to right click and go down to assign a new material. I'm just going to choose a Lambert material, which is just a matte, that's like a non-glossy surface. And if you just go over to your attribute editor, and you can scroll over and actually find that Lambert. In the color channel, I'm just going to click on this checker box, which gives me some options, and I'm going to plug in a file because we would like a texture. I'm going to change the filter type from quadratic to off, just because Minecraft is low res, and the image name, simply going to open this up and select tall grass. Now if you don't have this image on your computer somewhere, or you don't know how to get it, I'll probably just link it in the description so you can just download it from there. If that's not working for any reason, just do a quick Google search, Minecraft tall grass texture, and I'm sure you'll get a hit straight up. Alright, so I'll open that, and I can just simply select my other piece of grass and right click that and just assign an existing material, and I'll choose my Lambert 2. Okay, and I'm actually going to just rename that Lambert 2 tall grass underscore text, and that's pretty much good to go. We can easily add this to another scene. We can actually just save out this scene and then just use the scene to be imported into another scene that you're working on. And if you want to add some grass that's blowing, and you can do this up to a big level and really get some interesting grass patterns. And the great thing about it is it's all controlled with these 3 controls here, which is a really simple expression. So that's pretty much all you need to know. I'm just going to address a few things really quickly. First off, you'll notice the grass is only blowing in one direction. That's pretty simple. If you want to change the direction, simply go to your cluster, and you notice it's blowing in the X. If you want it to blow diagonally, just add the expression to your Z. If you want it to blow only in the Z, just add the expression to the Z and break the expression on the X. I'll just give you a quick demo of that. So let's say I want it to blow diagonally. I'm going to go to my X channel expression editor. I'll copy it. Actually, I'm literally just going to change the translate X to translate Z. I'm going to leave this all the same. Click edit, and now you'll find that this is now blowing in the Z direction, and you can see these are kind of offset 90 degrees to each other, and you can go through and change the direction as you see fit. Another thing too is that I actually wrote a really cool script that goes ahead, and if you export geometry from MC to OBJ or Mineways or a program like that from your actual Minecraft world, all you have to do is select your grass, you run the script, and it'll go through and automatically replace all the grass in your scene, or at least all the grass in your selection, with waving objects like this. Except in my simulation I've added some more advanced controls that actually you have waves of grass, so instead of these blowing at the same time, there's offset depending on how far apart they are. And there's some more advanced controls on just adjusting and fiddling with the direction, but it's pretty much the same basic thing at its heart. And so I'll probably link that in the description as well. If you're an animator, I definitely recommend go ahead and check that out. It'll probably save you a lot of time, and it can really bring a lot to your shot in terms of just simple movement and life, but it can really just give that feeling that there's an environment, that there's an atmosphere, that it's not just a completely static world out there that's made of blocks. It's alive in some way, and so I really think it can bring a certain quality to your videos. Anyway, I'm just about out of time. Let me know if you enjoyed this, and I can definitely do some more things on perhaps to do fire or torches, or blowing leaves, or any dynamics. I'm really interested in doing that kind of thing and just bringing your shot to life. If you enjoyed it, let me know. And as I said before, stay tuned in the next coming months. I do have a huge student original short film idea that's coming out, and I'm very excited about it, and I can't wait to show you guys. Alright, that's Andrew for Mr. AC Pilot. Take it easy, and I'll see you next time.